Dying to be Stuckmocky, Chapter 26, Vira's Acceptance. Wishoah reached up with gentle exploratory fingers and took hold of the hilt of the enticing sword. Vira froze. Mirrin had become every bit as unpredictable as Wishoah, so she was unsure how to react to the situation. When the furry fingers began to slide past the hilt towards the blade, Mirren's broad hand clamped suddenly around them and held them in place. He then carefully prized Wishoah's fingers off the sword and took hold of the hilt himself. Vira watched with bated breath as Mirrin pulled the sword from his belt and held it up in front of him. He stared for a moment at the blade as it caught the day's first rays of sunlight. Then his eyes turned aside to meet with Vira's anxious ones. Wishoah was reaching up for the shining sword and grunting urgently, but Vira tried to push its hands down while maintaining eye contact with the gladiator. She had no idea if Mirrin could even see Wishoah, but he couldn't miss hearing it. Vira saw a subtle shift within Mirren's eyes, which he couldn't decipher, but moments later he lifted the sword over his head and held it there, motionlessly pointing up into the dawn-bleached sky. Fahyrjeon gently reached out and placed its fingers over the hand on the hilt. Mirrin released his grip sufficiently to allow Fahyrjeon to transfer the sword to its own grasp and take possession. Vira silently exhaled. Meanwhile, Wishoah, cheated of its shiny toy, was climbing up Mirren's body inside his robe, making a lump that wriggled its way up to the neckline. Once there, it poked out its ears, then its snout, so that Mirren looked like he'd sprouted a second, rather furry head. The head turned and grinned and grunted at the other members of the clan, who were now gradually approaching the scene. Mirren looked down at the new addition to himself, then reflexively wrapped his arms around it when it showed signs of slipping down his body. Vira felt the situation was safe enough now to turn her attention to the rest of the clan, who were rapidly becoming visible to her. Now that Fahyrjeon was holding the sword, their attitude seemed bolder, even curious. Few seemed to be paying much attention to the gladiator in their midst, though, or to Vira either. She was beginning to realise she hadn't thought much at all about what it would be like to meet her Stuckmocky clan, since she had no way of communicating with them. She wondered if Fahyrjeon had even mentioned her weyrshofft status to the others yet. Quickly they were surrounded by so many tall, furry bodies, grunting, chuckling, cooing and gurgling, she couldn't see how many there were. She looked up at Fahyrjeon at her side in the hope of some guidance or reassurance in the rather overwhelming situation, but its attention was completely occupied with talking to the other Stuckmocky. Gradually the group began to shuffle back in the direction they had come from, and Vira and Mirrin shuffled along too. Not that they had any choice in the matter, as it was a case of shuffle or be trampled underfoot. "Are you okay, Mirrin?" asked Vira, wondering how he was coping, given his recent meltdown. "Okay?" asked Mirrin in a puzzled voice. They had to almost shout to be heard over the communal excitement. "Are you all right?" Vira quickly translated. "Can you see all the friendly faces around us?" she prompted. "Yes," he replied. "They became visible when the little one crawled up my robe." As far as Vira could make out, Wishoah appeared to be having a wonderful time and was relatively still for once. Seeing this, and hearing the more normal tone in Mirren's voice, helped her to relax. Going with the flow literally seemed to be the way to deal with the situation for the moment. After several minutes of shuffling, the cluster of furry bodies began dispersing, which was none too soon for Vira's liking. She was finding it hard to breathe in the warm, musty atmosphere. Suddenly, the last of the enclosing Stuckmocky turned and walked away, and seemingly disappeared into the landscape. As Vira looked around and sucked in deep breaths of cool, fresh air, she found herself once again standing in an empty, grassy plain, next to Fahyrjeon, Vira, and Mirrin. Only Wishoah remained, grunting quietly, and still firmly attached to Mirrin. "So where's the juggling costume I was promised?" quipped Vira, rather puzzled by the lack of outcome to the momentous occasion. "Costume?" queried Vira. Fahyrjeon gave a satisfied gurgle. "That went rather well, don't you think? I was a little worried they might not accept a human as a clan member." "Is that what happened?" asked Vira. "I could have sworn no one actually made eye contact with me, or was even aware I existed." "Oh, no, you made a wonderful impression on them. I was very gratified by how well you conducted yourself, Vira. Well done." There was an uncomfortable pause before Fahyrjeon turned to Mirrin. "You too, Mirrin." Mirrin stared warily into Fahyrjeon's eyes, unsure whether he was having his leg pulled or not. "Well, at least Mirrin actually did something. I just shuffled a lot." Vira thought for a moment. "Was it the way I shuffled?" "It was the way you are, Vira, as always," replied Fahyrjeon enigmatically. It then spread its arms wide, took a deep breath, and said genially, "And now it is time to make yourselves at home. I'm afraid we will have to share until we can make other arrangements." Vira looked around doubtfully at the scrubby plain. "We're home? Great! Which clump of grass is ours?" "This one," said Fahyrjeon, reaching down and opening a camouflaged hatch in the ground. Beneath the hinged lid, covered in grass stalks, was a bamboo ladder that led down into the utter darkness of a dank hole. Fahyrjeon gestured proudly towards the ladder and looked expectantly at Vira. "Oh," said Vira, "extra great.